This is a song I wrote in the back of a tour bus that was going to be on League with Dragons, but it didn't make it for several reasons. One, main one, it didn't belong. Two, it was one of those ones where the demo sort of felt to me like the natural form of the song. We spent a fair bit of time in several studios trying to make something happen with it as a band, but it wasn't really happening. And so, well, this is one of those long stories I warned you about. So if you have something you need to do, you call a babysitter or something, do that now. I'm not offended, it's fine. So when I write songs, if I'm telling a story, I'm completely committed to the story. I don't write metaphors, but I totally accept that every writer does write metaphors. In fact, you don't necessarily know what you're writing about. This does not, however, mean that any interpretation of a text is true. That's a very infantile position. But I do think that often, I got a lot of long stories about this one. I think often the meaning of a text, any given thing a writer does, and probably the person says in the long view, is obscure to the person writing it or saying it. That you often don't know why you're saying something or writing something. I remember we recorded Sax Romer #1 at Cotati, and Franklin's there, and I said, this seems like an old Mountain Goat song. It's just a long list of sort of images just being regurgitated without any particular meaning. And Franklin said, I thought it was about touring. And I went, oh, it's a pretty good read. He said, no, this one's about touring, and what was it? There's another one on the same record that he thought was about making an album, and I can't remember which one it was. But anyway, with this one, I am just writing about the vision you have if you watch Game of Death, Game of Death, the Bruce Lee movie. In that movie, and in many movies that feature the martial arts, you will see you'll have long training sequences. And then these sequences are comped by Stallone and people like that, and they also Van Damme do training sequences, but they're never as good as the Bruce Lee training sequence, like at the top of a mountain monastery. And he's all by himself, and you go, who trains by themselves without a teacher? But Bruce Lee does, right? And so, it's pretty impossible to state to a person, if you're not a person my age, what Bruce Lee meant to 5-year-old boys in 1972, but he was everything, right? And these training sequences, people say, oh yeah, he goes to a mountain and he has just this wild discipline that he has to develop before he goes and kills literally everybody inside the building with his bare hands, right? So I had that vision. I was in the back of a tour bus trying not to sink into the depression that tends to eat me on tour, and one way to do that is to write songs, and so not to get depressed, to avoid it. So I had this title, Hand of Death, right? And it's a thing that that Bruce Lee, when we were 5 and 6, was said to be able to do, to kill you by touching you, which I believe. And like with no force at all, that he could focus his chi well enough to just absolutely. It's a weird, great thing for children to believe. So I was thinking about that. I told you it's a long story. It's coming. And I wrote this song that is more or less just a sort of a description of that sort of sequence that happens in these sorts of movies that I like, and I sort of want to sort of bring whatever it is that I do to bear on those images. And then we go in the studio to try and make it work. We're not making it work. And as I listen to it, I realize that it's a song about the mountain goats, right? It's a song, there's a line of thinking that states that every dream you have is in fact a dream about yourself, and you are every character in the dream. I love this style of reading dreams. And there's another style of thinking about writing that says no matter what you're writing, you're telling your own story in some way or another, right? To this I say, have you read Clive Barker? But in this case, it became clear to me that this is a song about when I was, 23, 22, living in employee housing in Norwalk, which cost most months $130, except when we went out of contract and the union would be negotiating a new contract, because we had a union, because all workers should have a union. Shout out to Brittany, friend of the worker. So when we go out of contract, my rent would go down to whatever it had been the previous time we'd been out of contract. It was like $35 a month. So, which is like, you want a contract, but at the same time, free rent in a 1935 place that has steam radiator that's celebrated in many really not good songs. And I was making good money for the first time in my whole life, and I was using it to pay off a legal, a fine I had for drug stuff that I had been arrested and jailed for. And so I was paying down that fine. I really wanted it off out of my face, and so I was paying that, living cheap. and trying to teach myself to write poetry and then songs. I made enough money to buy a little guitar, and I would sit there. I remember trying to play the F. Right? Sound like, fuck, how does anybody do that? And like, seriously, I remember very clearly, because you have to press down these two strings with your index finger, and this, most people bar it like this. Bar chord felt like the most distant thing. And how the fuck does anybody do that, right? And so you can hear on the early Mountain tapes how halting my step is, but I could also feel that I was getting somewhere with it. This is called Hand of Death. I feel like I have a lyric sheet over there that I maybe want in front of me just in case.
Yeah, it's right there. I'm telling you. In 20 years on the road, I've developed organizational skills. One, I know I got that one. Yeah, that's all.
Hand of Death by the Broncos. Rehearsing for the tournament of champions. Somebody is going to have to cleanse the temple. Trained by moonlight all night. Practice with a blindfold on. Try not to think too hard about the neighbors up on my balcony that overlooks the harbor. Preparing to deploy the hand of death. Preparing to deploy the hand of death. Rest among the ruins of old empires. Rise from my heavy sleep at sundown. Byways on my pathways. Beckoning. Stay focused on the target. Feel close enough to taste its beating heart. Hungry as a captive of the king. Preparing to deploy the hand of death. Preparing to deploy the hand of death. Sure and steady. Almost ready. Remind myself to breathe, heed thou my counsel. Skin and bones and blood and tender flesh. There will be no return from these beginnings. Preparing to deploy the hand of death. Prepare